So,
Hey,
welcome back to Consistently Candid. This time I'm here with Nathan Young. We're just going to have a chat about forecasting and general AI related stuff. Do you want to introduce yourself and tell everyone a bit about what you do?
hi. I'm Nathan Young. I run a small development team. That's what I actually do. I build sort of like voting apps and app visualization and stuff more broadly in the forecasting sort of tech space. And I also work for the Swift Center, which is a like forecasting shop. You have a number of these. Samasvedi, the Swift Center, the super forecasters have one. I mean, arguably Epoch is one. There's a number of these places where people do forecasts, and I work part-time for them as full-time. I build tech for this kind of space and just also sort of normal, like complex web applications.
Cool. So I guess the forecasting aspect is going to be, like the most interesting for us to talk about here. So if people don't really have a good understanding of like what forecasting is as a practice, like can you obviously like in very simple terms, it's just trying to make predictions about the future, but like can you kind of explain a bit more about how it works?
Yeah, so I'll try and give a broad explanation, right? Forecasting is not something that like EAs or rationalists came up with. Forecasting broadly is like very common in the world at large, like financial forecasts. I remember being sat down by one of my friends who was a consultant, and he had like this big spreadsheet, and it was like every month it was like, how much money do you expect to have? How much money do you have? This is like what we do in my business all the time. This was, like 15 years ago, 20 years ago. Like this is like normal standard, not 15 years, it was like 12 years ago. This is like normal standard financial forecasting. Like weather forecasting, other like broad, like what's the weather going to be like? We're going to see. So this is a thing which exists in many places, and I think the sort of like rationalist or EA kind of forecasting is sort of based off like Philip Tetlock, this academic, did this work where he said, how good are political experts at predicting future events? And so he asked them those questions about things that were going to happen, and then they forecasted, they gave percentage answers on those questions, or they guessed which was the most likely. I can't recall which. And it turns out that they were like very poor at it. And then he did some more work, and he found out that there were some people who were quite good at this kind of forecasting about coming to answers to geopolitical questions. And so he wrote this book, Super Forecasting, about, well, he wrote a previous book sort of about the first bit, and then he wrote the second book, Super Forecasting, about this group of people who are pretty good at coming to answers on geopolitical questions. And like really the main thing is like, I guess two or three main points is like, you can do better than the talking heads on TV in terms of predicting geopolitical outcomes, so it's very difficult. And the kinds of people who do better on predicting these sort of hard esoteric questions really care a lot about how accurate they are, and that they look at their track records a lot, and they try and see things they improve, and they think pretty hard about this stuff. And this suggests that like if your job is around making decisions, then there might be benefit or correlation there, right? This is like, that's the kind of like the weak thing. Like there's a different discussion to be had about whether you should have like forecasting consultancies who get like brought in like research agencies, like in some sense like comms agencies or legal agencies, right? They're like a specific piece of expertise that you bring in. That's a different question. There's something about whether people find forecasting fun. That's a different question. But for like the majority of people, like, should I forecast things? It's like yeah, there's like, there's some soft evidence that like that it'll be useful to you in your job if you put aside some time every 3 months or every week to forecast, whether work gets done or whether, what specific things happen. Then probably if you keep looking back at those, then like that will give you some useful insights in how you think, into your own blind spots. And if you had somebody who you knew was very good at that, then again, probably that would suggest that they would be good at doing other aspects of decision making. Though, if they're very flawed in some other way, then like maybe not. It's not, if you're a developer, it's not important in terms of priority over like learning to code. If you're like a researcher, it's not important in terms of priority in terms of like doing lots of research, publishing like the papers. But like even with all those caveats, like that's like quite a powerful thing to be able to say. To be able to say like it seems like there is this sort of underrated form of personal development slash productivity in terms of like who's going to do a good job, who's going to do a less good job, and also that yeah, like that seems like for most people, I think I would recommend everybody tries to think about how their future self will feel about things. If you're doing a job, you think, how will I feel about this job in 6 months? Ideally, concretely, right? You think, you just write down like, I'll be having fun in my job, 60%, and like then you just like look back that in 6 months' time. There's a tool called Fatebook, which I recommend. Allows you to make these like simple. It's built by Sage. You make these simple forecasts, and then you look back at them. And I think for most people that would be good for them, right? Like, but then that's half an hour every, that's like half an hour a month or something. Right? I'm not saying do a lot. When you move house or attempted to, when you take a new job, when you make a big decision at your job, when you start dating somebody, when you think about your friends, whether they're going to be happy or in a new relationship or a new job or a new, like, you could just write these things down, and over time you could start to develop a sense of whether you'll have whether you're right or wrong. This is just like, I'd say, like a pretty useful, broad, fundamental life skill alongside like thinking quantitatively, being polite, like knowing how to like research something. It's just like, in the same way that if you might think on an evening, will I have a good time at this party? And then like by the end of the evening, if you became very well calibrated at that, then you'd know whether you wanted to go to these events or not. Like will I enjoy the pizza or the pasta? If you know which you'll enjoy, you can know what to order. This is like a broad, but that's like, half an hour, as I say, like half an hour a month or something. But then there's like a separate thing, which is like forecasting as a job that you might, if you're in a company, you might bring in some forecasters to help you make a decision. Or building some sort of large internal forecasting system. Those two things I think are a bit different, and I don't think that most people need to be spending like 5 hours a week forecasting.
Yeah. So there's one thing you can do, which is like just kind of like aggregating predictions about your everyday life and then like seeing how well calibrated you are about things. If somebody wanted to become more well calibrated at making predictions, what should they do? Or like, yeah, what's a way to go about that?
I mean, I think there's like two rough. I mean, okay, so first of all, what they should do is like they should just do it, right? Like there's a lot of ink is spilled about how to become, but really the first thing to do is just like make some forecasts, find something you care about. There's a number of different forecasting sites. If you want to put forecast personal things, I'd recommend Fatebook. If you like geopolitics and sort of like drier questions and not getting very addicted to things, then I would recommend Metaculus. And if you like addiction and prediction, like betting and like your attention being focused on things, then like Manifold. And if you want to bet real money, then like there's like actual betting, and sometimes that's interesting too. Stock trading is a kind of forecasting, right? You've got to, and like you're against really hard opponents, so there's like something nice there. But the first thing I'd recommend is that people do something, and probably for most people, I would recommend, I don't know, Fatebook or Metaculus or Manifold, depending on those things. Like probably like Fatebook, I think is really good for most people. Like it allows you to forecast the things in your own life. And then once you have some forecasts in 3 months, you look back and you think, why did I get that right and why did I get that wrong? And then, if you want some more things, maybe trying to write down some notes on why you wrote specific forecasts, being like, I thought about this, I thought about that, I was thinking this. And then, if you want some more stuff, I think base rates is like a really good thing to think about, to sort of think, well, I tend not to enjoy my jobs. So, will I enjoy this work when I've got this new job? Probably not. Right? Like, that's just like an easy thing to do. And if you're doing some geopolitical forecasting, then you can maybe go on Wikipedia and you can read through cases and you can say, well, there were 6 cases like this and 2 cases like that, and 1 case like that. So, a little bit over 60% of the time, it goes like blah, blah, blah. So base rates is, if the first tip is just like look over your own forecasts and think, just spend, another half an hour at the end of the month or whatever being like, how could I have done better here? What kind of patterns of thought was I using? If another one is like base rates, and like, I guess like a third one is like model building, like maybe you like just like write a few lines, you draw some boxes, on whatever program you want. I have like a little thing that I built that helps me do this, but equally you could just grab up Excel or Python or whatever. You could just connect some boxes and be like, how likely is Trump to get the election? Well, I feel in my gut it's this, and then like looking at betting markets, it's this, and like I don't think they've taken into account this, and you just like write the different numbers up, and then you maybe try and combine them in some way that feels like right to you. So those are some basic, and then there is like more complicated stuff, right? You can be like running simulations, you can be doing like statistical tests, but I think most people for their own lives would benefit a surprising amount just when they have a question, thinking like, how does this tend to go? Like, oh, like, I'm always optimistic for a new job, but it tends not to be that great. So like maybe the reason I'm trying to switch jobs is just because I'm always trying to switch jobs. Like, like even that thought process is probably going to be valuable to you. Like, I'm always very optimistic in the early stages of a relationship, but it often doesn't turn out. And therefore, my expectation should be that it probably won't. Or alternatively, the other way, right? Like, I'm always worried about money, but I always have money. So I'm probably not going to be broke at the end of 2 months, even though my body is telling me like, where's the money?
Yeah, cool. So what's like, yeah, at a very high level, say you're like trying to make a forecast about like a geopolitical event, like I don't know, yeah, like will Trump be elected in 2024, or will there be a ceasefire in Ukraine before 2025 or something like that? What's the very basic process? How do you go about doing that?
So on the Trump one, like often what I will, if I have like a short time, then I will probably just find a load of different forecasting sites, make a median of them and defer to those, maybe with like an internal like gut forecast as well. If I have a longer time, then yeah, I'm going to put out some like different blocks of things that I think matter. So it's like, is Trump going to get the nomination? Well, at this point, like Trump is like basically certain to get the nomination. I don't know, if I haven't checked recently, he may literally already have enough. Does he have enough? Does he have enough delegates?
I actually don't know.
Delegates.
Probably.
Yeah. Okay. So he's got the nomination. So for Trump not to get the nomination, right? He has to. So there's like some understanding of systems here, right? He either dies, which in the next 6 months, Trump's an old guy, but I don't know, like the odds of people dying every year are like I think 1 to 2%, something like that. So you could like look at that up, and it's like 0.5% chance that like Trump has like a major health disaster or something. And then the way that the American system works is that nothing is over till it's over. I mean, as a Brit, this is pretty sort of surprising. Like in Britain, when you elect your MP, they are your MP, and it's like very unlikely that they're going to like randomly decide to change parties. And if they did, that would be like a big thing for them to do. But in the US, you don't vote for like people, you vote for like some other people to choose those people, and sometimes the people in the middle can change their minds. So there is a chance that at the conference, that the electors for Trump, or whatever they're called, representatives, I don't know the words, guys, could decide they actually don't want to choose Trump. They could choose someone else. A version of which happens if you've watched Hamilton, which many people have. There's like the bit at the end where it's like, if you had to choose, like that's them talking to all the delegates, being like, like what's going on here. And it's not exactly the same process because that's about the president rather than their nominees, but it's a similar one. Like you always end up choosing people who can change their minds at some stage. Crazy political system. Don't know why Americans did that. Well, I don't. No, I think it's bad on net. But not crazy. I understand it's like 60% bad. But so there is a question there as well, right? Like if Trump gets criminal charges, will he go, like, will the conference be like, no? So therefore you want to like have some sense of when he's going to get criminal charges. And like those are a lot about when the cases take place. Like my sort of cash view, I haven't looked into it super recently, is that like it just looks like those cases are going to take too long before they run. Right, one of them has just started, which I guess will be like, I don't know, 2 to 4 months, and then the Republican convention happens the 15th of July. So like we do have enough time for it to squeak through, but last time I checked there was like some complication. So like the question is like, is the legal case going to happen? And then even if you imagine they find him guilty of like a felony, it does seem pretty unlikely to me at this stage that the nomination isn't just going to be like, I mean, I would be like 90% that they would still probably even like Kyle on that. It seems like he's got such a firm grip on them now that like he'll just be like, this is Joe Biden going after me. But there is some chance that like, so like I wouldn't be like 99%. So like let's say I'm like 95%. So there's like some more uncertainty. And then it's like, okay, Trump versus probably Biden, like what happens in that case? And again, like that feels like a sort of thing where like here you want to like look at the betting markets again. But also like for a while, I had moved more in favor of Trump because I was looking at the voting and the like polling compared to 4 years ago was just like much more in favorable of Trump than it had been 4 years ago. And it sort of seemed like the betting markets hadn't really like taken that into, or maybe Metaculus hadn't really taken that into account. So there's like something you're trying to track where you think, which groups you think have what information. Like if everybody has the information you have, then probably you can't do a better job than all the clever people on Metaculus and or Polymarket. But if you think or have taken something into account that they haven't, then you might want to like move them a bit. So yeah, I probably would like put a number of boxes on the page, try and put numbers, try and like draw them through, try and times things through. And then once I got the numbers out the back end, I would sort of look at that and sense check those and sort of be like, do these seem like reasonable numbers? I mean, currently we're still relatively far out from the election, and so I just, when it comes to the actual, I'm like, I've never moved more than like 5%. Maybe there was a time when I was 60% Biden, but I don't even know if that's true. I think probably I've only ever moved as far as 55% Biden or 55% Trump.
So what are you on now for who's going to win?
I think I'm about 50-50 at this point. Because like
Yeah, I've got that from a lot of people.
Biden pulled back some ground. I don't know. Biden is old, but I think Trump is a little bit more popular than people think. But I also think that abortion stuff is very unpopular. And being a criminal, like, now it is legal. The judge has like made it clear that you can say that Trump is a rapist. And I just think it's like pretty plausible that the Democrats can really like find an angle to be like, do you want to vote in this like rapist who wants to ban abortions? And that will go quite well for them. And also like it is kind of underrated in the discussion. Like Biden beat Trump before. Like generally when like the same thing happens again, you should think it's like a bit more likely that it's going to happen again. So I don't know. I haven't looked loads into this one recently, which is like why I'm uncertain. But I don't. I have a very hard time believing anyone has the information to be more than like 57% confident either way at this stage. And frankly, for most people, it's like a waste of their time, right? Like, you should just, most people should just really seriously take into account that it like either could happen. Like, there is really a chance that you wake up on November, whenever it is, and like Trump gets it. And I remember people being pretty shell shocked in 2016. I remember like the stuff after Brexit. I remember COVID. I think it's like worth doing a little bit of emotional work beforehand and being like, oh, like, how am I going to feel? Are there things I need to do before then? Are there like, yeah, like, but I guess I also think like probably people people overrated the impact of Trump last time, and I think they probably will again if he wins.
Yeah, that seems right. Yeah, you mentioned before we started recording that you had takes on how valuable forecasting is perceived as, like within rationalism or effective altruism, and maybe you think it is like not as valuable as some people think it is. But yeah, do you want to like get into that a little bit?
I think for the average person, the typical member of our country, they would like benefit quite a lot from some forecasting practices, and so would their organizations. I think for the like median member of EA rationalism, as I say, like I think a reasonable high priority is like half an hour a month or something, just like having some life goals. In the same way that like planning your career a bit is good, or quantifying things like a bit is like a pretty high priority for individuals. But I don't think it's a high priority for most people to be like trying to spend 5 hours a week on Metaculus. Or, and I don't think for most organizations that we have the like killer forecasting app such that they should just like implement it and then they'll like make loads better decisions. Yeah. So, notably, well, no, there's like some slightly better evidence now, maybe that like up to 5 years, but like forecasting beyond maybe somewhere between 3 and 5 years is not very good. It's just like becomes very noisy. And yeah, like I do not back forecasting's ability to track events 10 years in the future. I just like, and like this is like a hard problem. It's like frustrating and difficult that we have to make decisions about a future that we are very bad at foreseeing. But yeah, so I think for the median person, I would say, like, if you can write down some things, again, I think Fatebook is great for this. If you can write down some things that you think can happen a bit in the future, and then see how good you were, like, if you really like forecasting, then go for it. And if you're in an organization, again, if you're in like, if you've never heard of the concept of geopolitical forecasting before, then I think it's like a bit of a worth a look, particularly if your organization could benefit from either that skill set brought in, or you think, oh, it would be worth us maybe like trying some of our teams doing some forecasting if you've never considered it. But I think many rationalist organizations have, and they haven't found it to work for them. So, like, I don't know, let's wait until we have a better way of doing it. Have somebody on your team whose job it is to occasionally look at forecasting or try something out. But I don't think every organization would benefit from implementing, like, I don't think we've got the way of implementing large forecasting systems internally such that like every organization would benefit. And I don't think that most individuals would benefit from several hours a week of doing it. I think people tend to do what they want to do, and some people really love forecasting, and some people don't feel much affinity to it at all. And I am just not confident enough to tell somebody who feels no affinity towards it that they should use a lot of their time and effort. Like, yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I guess we're gonna talk about forecasting and AI, but if you think that like beyond like the 3 to 5 year time scale, the usefulness of forecasting decreases a lot, then presumably you also think that unless you have quite short timelines, then it's pretty difficult to forecast about something like how is AI going to go for humanity in the long run? Like, how
Yeah.
does that map onto your belief that we can use forecasting to answer those kinds of questions?
Um, well, I think possibly we one day will be able to. Uh, do I think that? No, I probably actually don't think that. Because I think like if we were discovering forecasting like 300 years ago, then I would be like, oh well, like it seems like the world is like quite similar. So like we're getting better at forecasting faster than the world is becoming weird. But here, it's not clear to me that we are getting like it's like I think if like any AGI stuff happens, then like forecasting just becomes like very confusing. And like so then it conceivably like our ability to predict will even get narrower. Yeah, I think it's like a hard problem that you have to look in the face of and say, yeah, there is like a real like fog of war. I don't know if you've ever played a game with like a fog of war where you've got to like make your decisions, but like the other player is over there making the decisions. You don't know what they're doing until they like enter your terrain. Well, the future is like a bit like that, and I think it's very difficult to think about. Yeah, past 3 to 5 years. Yeah, I think like and you know so yeah, my pdoom is lower than many people's. I am pretty optimistic. I'm sort of in the like I don't know 2 to 9% range. I think things are probably going to be fine. I think we could afford to take a bit of time before like aggressively regulating. um like I think it seems pretty optimistic that regulations have come in sort of like as like strong as they have over the last year. It seems like regulators, they're like, okay, we've got to skill up, we've got to employ, you know, AI experts. Those things seem good, and uh, and the public seems like very willing to like bring down the ban hammer on AI. Like you ask the public about should these things be like regulated, even if it slows them down. The public seems yes, they should. So you know, for me personally, I don't it seems pretty plausible that like there will be time to like rapidly tighten if things get like a lot scarier, which I just don't find them that scary at the moment. And I have some loose sense that that's the right thing to do. I mean, like the counter argument to this is something like if you're very uncertain, then you should preserve optionality. And if there's like some chance that things go very badly, then you should like uh, you should prefer to be over. You should prefer to be too cautious rather than like not cautious enough. And I don't know, like ugh, something about this just sort of seems wrong to me. I can't quite articulate it. Maybe it's that this argument seems like very, very broad. Like you could have applied it sort of anywhere. You could have applied it when we were like monkeys and trees, and sort of being like, whoa, 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 guys. At some point, we're going to like go down to the ground and then like build AI. So we better stay up here. That like in terms of like evolutionary timescales, like hundreds of thousands of years is quite short, and so like it is not clear to me like why like what is the right amount of time that you should wait and you should be like we should be cautious on. I think that's like yeah. So this is like a blurry higgledy piggledy thing, but I'm not super worried. In fact, I'm probably like a bit less worried, and I don't. The area where we can forecast confidently, risk seems pretty low currently, and then there's this like big murky space where I just try to acknowledge that it's like big and murky, and it's hard to think well about. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess the problem is like, yeah, so this kind of relies on a situation where if things are gonna go really badly, we're gonna get some kind of warning that they're gonna go really badly. Like I think you said, if things get really scary, we can like bring the hammer down or something. But there just doesn't seem to be any good reason to think that we will necessarily get any prior warning. I mean that like obviously in some worlds we would, but then in like a fast takeoff scenario, we're not going to get any warning. Like we could get
Right. Okay.
things that
So here's
actually
my biggest
yeah.
criticism of that is like, it does seem like fast takeoff has become less likely, right? Like, there's already been
I don't
some
know.
opportunities for fast takeoff that haven't happened. We could have fast taken off a year ago, but we didn't.
Yeah, but I don't. Yeah, I still don't see how it not having happened in the past is evidence that it's not going to happen in the future. Like if we just keep throwing more like data and compute at this thing, why should we think that we're not going to hit a tripwire? I don't like. I'm not sure how we can ever. I know because people could say, "Oh, this is like totally unfalsifiable." Like you can always have this
Yeah.
thing that like might happen in the future. But I mean, I don't know. I just don't really see any good reason to think that we're in the slow takeoff world versus the fast takeoff world.
Yeah. I think if we've got any, like, I don't claim to be a particularly clear thinker about this. In fact, like, yeah, there's like some alarm bells of like, like Oliver Habricker's gonna be listening to this being like just shaking his head. But like I nonetheless, it does seem a bit to me that like if there were chances that like if there were predictions that things might go really badly if we continued and we did continue, then it says that those predictions were slightly wrong, right? Like on like the fact they didn't happen. Like it's only like a minor update because of if they did happen, maybe we'd be dead, yada yada. But and that therefore I think implies that like the kinds of worlds in which things were like exceeding rapidity was possible are also a little bit less likely. So that's like part of it. But another part of it is I just think a lot of people who talk about this topic don't acknowledge how hard coding is. And like
Okay.
I'm not a very good coder, but I'll tell you free that like it seems there's more orders of magnitude of being good at this skill than many people sort of acknowledge in how they talk about this. Like you've got somebody who can build like 1,000-line application and a 10,000-line application and 100,000-line application. And like some applications that people can build are really big, right? Like Facebook, I don't know how many lines of code Facebook has, right? But it's got like, I don't know, is it somewhere between, it's not 10,000, is it? So like, is it somewhere between like 1,000,000 and like, 10 billion or something? Like it's just like huge repository. And repositories like that, there aren't many repositories that big and interconnected, which are crawlable on the web. Like Facebook aren't letting their source code be like crawled by Claude or Chat or GPT-4. So it's like it seems very unlikely to me that mere scale is going to be enough to get you to the ability to run complex systems like that. And it seems that like that's at least one necessary part of like an AI takeover scenario. Like it seems to me that an AI that's capable of taking over the world is at least like as competent as like Facebook. But it has some other things as well, right? It's got to be very good at keeping secrets. If the whole organization of Facebook tried to take over the world, then it would like probably leak that it was going to do so. So you need like the competence, like, and the secret keeping, and like maybe at least one more thing. And it seems like often in these discussions, people are just like, well, we could just like we could kick the ball all the way to the end of the court. And then I'm like, okay, but there is a chance, or it seems kind of increasingly likely, that the end of the court is like not merely like a football pitch away or like a town away, but is in fact like on Mars. And that like, absolutely, if I build a rocket gun powerful enough, I can fire a football to Mars. But there's just our ranges of difficulty, and I am not convinced that we are going to see like an AI tool where I can be like, build me Facebook in the next 3 years, and it's going to be like boop boop, and it's going to build me an entire like Facebook application. To be clear,
Yeah.
with accounts, with moderation, with like all of the things that Facebook has, as opposed to like it can build me like a nice looking single page front end.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it just depends who you, I mean, like the people who are working at the labs building the things are like extremely um like Dario Amodei went on the Ezra Klein podcast the other day. I don't know if you heard this. And
Yeah.
he was like, well, one, he said that he thought that we were going to be getting into like self-replicating kind of like AGI territory between like next year and 2028 or 2029 or something. But he was also like, yeah, like within 3 to 18 months, I expect that I could just tell a chatbot, like, go and organize a birthday party for me. And then the chatbot could, like call up all the venues and it could like order the cake and it could do all of these things like totally autonomously. And he was saying, yeah, like literally within, yeah, maybe even just 3 months from now, it's going to be doing all those things. And you could say, oh, well, that's hype. They're incentivized to oversell their own products, blah, blah, blah. But I'm kind of like, if this is coming from, like they're seeing all sorts of things internally that we don't see. And if they have that level of confidence that they're going to be able to do these
Sure, but
crazy things in the very
I
near
mean,
term, like, shouldn't we listen to them?
we can take internal views on this, and then we can like track how good we are at like forecasting it, right?
Yeah.
Like, I would be surprised if in 3 months that's capable.
Well, it's
I
a
mean,
3 to 18 to be fair. The
right.
3 is
So
like the
actually, like, I wouldn't be like super surprised if in 18 months we could do that. I mean, like, I don't know, maybe like that just feels like in 18 months. I think I might be surprised if it was doing a really good job of that, which I think is quite important for birthday parties. Like, as a brief sidebar, I think like we don't see a lot of AI art. It's like is a take. Like, I think, I don't know about you, I'm not
true
super on
actually. Yeah.
Instagram. Maybe you are on Instagram, um, or like a different social media than Twitter, which I use. But like, we don't see a lot of AI art. Why don't we see a lot of AI art? Well, this is an article I'm like to get in place, but I'll give people a scoop. My sense is that like people, like, taste is really important to people, and if you care about a thing, you want, like, the things you see tend to actually be very good. We have good selection systems. And so AI art is not very good at being spectacular. It's very good at being like comfortably mediocre. I ask for a picture of a dog, I get a picture of a dog. But like, I don't see many pictures of dogs. Like, I don't love pictures of dogs. And even if I did, then I'd probably have like even like more defined taste criteria. So the only AI I personally see is this guy named, I think, Jordan Chase or something on Twitter, who makes funny cartoons using AIR. But the reason I see them is because he's good at making cartoons, and that seemingly he just never felt the competence to do cartoons before, but now he can like rapidly ask something, he can spin one up. But he absolutely could have been a cartoonist 5 years ago doing a sort of XKCD simple line drawing art style, and he could have like posted these. I think they would have been still pretty funny. So like AI, and I think the same is going to be true of music. I don't think we're going to see in the next like year or two loads and loads of like AI songs. We're going to see like a couple of people who probably could have written parody music anyway, producing some parody songs. Like, I don't think we've seen like a lot of like AI built applications. It has supported, Copilot is useful, GitHub Copilot, but I don't think we've seen a lot of people who just like have built like AI built sites, right? And my guess would be that this too, like, you just actually aren't functionally. I would be surprised if functionally lots of people are using AI to organize their birthday parties in 18 months, because it will just probably organize you a kind of like wonky, strange birthday party. And instead, what you might use it for is like you might have a system where like it recommends the things it's going to do, and then you say, okay, yeah, don't do that, do this. Oh yeah, that's a good idea. Okay, can you spin up some more things? And then like maybe you go out to the vendors, or maybe you ask it to call the vendors. Though I I don't know, like, I wouldn't. Again, that like screams some alarm bells for like, are people going to be happy with like AI calls talking to an AI? Like, are people actually going to be happy with that, or is that going to get regulated into the ground? Um, like I'm just a bit like, yeah, like I think if we really pin down Dario and what he means by that, I wouldn't be surprised if he was like, oh yeah, no, what I mean is that within 3 to 18 months we'll have the capability to organize a theoretical birthday party, but probably most people won't. And then I'm like, okay, yeah, but like that's not the thing that most people have heard when you said the thing you said. And like, do I
Yeah, I mean,
think
I guess
that, yeah,
the key part of it is, yeah, not whether people will actually use this, but whether it's possible. And then it's like interesting, like, yeah, I don't really care whether I'm going to be able to use an AI to plan a birthday party or not, but I care about whether that's predictive of like the kinds of things it could do in short order after that. Because he was saying, yeah, we can do the birthday party thing maybe this year, and then next year we're in like X risk territory where these things are just like running wild everywhere. Or like
yeah,
between
I mean,
2025 and 2029 or something. And I'm kind of
yeah,
like, well, if someone who works at the lab is saying that, I can't, I just don't find, I can't think of any way to confidently dismiss that. And he's not the only one that's saying it either. So it's
yeah,
kind of
so I
like,
mean, it just does seem
you know,
like first of all, I'm not sure about the birthday thing. But if we have the birthday thing where like you and I are regularly like tip tapping and being like, do this for me, and then it's just like absolutely getting done. I'm like, build me a website that like, you know, find me some like guns and bombs, blah blah blah, and they arrive at my door. Then it does seem like then it seems like very likely to me that A will be able to like ramp up all the concern, like then I will be concerned. I will be able to be like, now's the time to like regulate. And then like the public will be on our side, and there already is like a load of infrastructure being built around regulating these things. Like that does seem to me
yeah,
a problem that you can like leave until you're like very like people seem to argue that like regulation only happens once and like you have the chance to regulate now, so you might as well regulate hard. But I I mean I kind of think that's why many things suck. Like I feel like we have the chance to like do this better rather than being like, oh, we have our brief turn at the wheel. We don't like where the ship is going, so we're gonna like ram it into the bank. I'm like, well, maybe we all hate the people who do that, and like we have like a big problem of being able to trust like activist groups, and maybe we should try and like aim for a higher standard, which is why I don't think the 6 months pause like last year was like a good thing. And like I know some people are saying, oh, it wasn't like a literal thing, but I mean, it seemed like Scott Alexander wrote that article where he interviewed all the pause people, and some of them really did think that we should have like periods of indefinite pauses. And I want those people to say how long those pauses ought to have been or ought to be. And then once that amount of time has passed, I want those people to say, oh yeah, I was wrong actually. Like it just seems like there's a lack of people being like, oh,
uh,
I was a bit wrong here.
I guess, I don't know, like the 6 months pause letter, I don't like, I like the idea of doing a pause. I would want the pause to be indefinite until we have reasonable like levels of confidence in safety. I think the fact that they phrased it as 6 months was kind of silly because obviously to a lot of people that's going to sound super arbitrary and they're going to say, why is it 6 months and what were we supposed to do at the end of 6 months? Like I don't think it was particularly well executed. um but I'm not really sure that, because I think in your tweet you kind of said that you thought the year since the letter had been had proved, or yeah, had made the people who signed the letter seem a little bit silly, and I don't know if
Well,
I
not
agree with
silly,
that
just
because I
like
don't.
a bit wrong.
Oh, a bit wrong, yes. Sorry, silly was the wrong word there, but it doesn't seem like they most of the people that were signing it weren't making any claims about what was going to happen within a discrete time period if we didn't pause. Like certainly not a year. None of them were like, okay, we better pause now for 6 months, otherwise by this time next year the world's going to have ended. Like they were just saying,
Yeah,
okay, things are getting a little bit murky here. We don't really know what we're doing. This seems like a good time to step back and reevaluate.
I
So I
mean,
don't think
I sense
any of the
that like
concerns have been disproven.
I sense that some of them probably actually do make those claims. Like if I really wanted to search for it, and like if that's as correctly as I can, right? Like I think like I don't I think I actually will be able to find some people who think like, oh, there was a few percent chance that like
But a few
um
percent chances, like there could have been a 5% chance it was going to happen, and then it's
right, but like you still have
pretty
to like
unsurprising that it didn't.
you have to like update a little bit. Like I'm not saying you have to update a lot, but like I think it's
Yeah,
like a healthy practice to like begin some of those updates. Like I would like I'm building I am building the foundations for the argument I'm going to make in 5 years' time. If like like if in 5 years' time, right, like it's pretty common to like use AI to build like a sort of like semi-complicated sort of like web application, a CRUD application, if anyone's like, something like that. It like works more or less the first time. You maybe like ask it to spin out things again. If like, there's like AI tools for making images where you can like get the eyes right, and then you can like spin up the rest of the face, and then you can like pause things and move it around. If it's like kind of common to like generate like minute-long videos and then cut sections of them, but that's all. Like, trading, like there's AI tools that aid trading, but traders are still like very much human. If in like 5 years that's what the case is, then I think some of these people will have like functionally been wrong.
Yeah.
Like you will
I mean,
have like, it seems to me you spend like a reasonable amount of time like worrying about this, as do like many people. I mean, as do I a bit. Like, and like it's just possible that we kind of over worried about it. And therefore I'm saying like calibrating the amount of time we spend and like what we advocate for, like it's worth thinking like what would make us be wrong. Because like if things really start to ramp up in the next 3 months, I will be wrong. And that will be like, it is important to my like mental state now that I can be wrong in 3 months.
yeah. I mean, I'm totally open to being wrong, and if things don't seem like they're playing out in the way that I expect, well, to be fair, like I don't really expect anything. I have this kind of like radical uncertainty that just kind of comes from not being an expert and witnessing a bunch of experts say a bunch of things that contradict each other.
Right. Well,
Um,
I think you do expect some
but
things a bit, right? Like it does seem to me that like, yeah, you defer to certain experts more than others, and I tend to actually like the experts you defer to like a reasonable amount. So like that's not, yeah, I don't know saying, but it's like you do have some expectations, and like, I think it would be worth considering, and for people listening, considering like what concrete things could happen in the world to make you think, oh, I was wrong about that.
yeah, I mean, what concrete things could happen? I mean, maybe the birthday party planning one was one example, but what's something that would make you think, oh my god, like time to slam on the brakes right now?
Um, yeah, I think if we, I guess I'm following this like Devin stuff with interest, this like AI
Yeah,
dev. Like, I mean, I think if in the next year we started to see that, I don't know, like if in the next year a Devin type tool went from, I think Devin's at like 10 or 20% of whatever metric is the important one. And if it seemed like it credibly went to like 50%, mainly driven by changes that it itself had implemented, then that would be, I think that would be like, I think that would be like a knock against my position. I think if if you could have like flawless million line like repos built, if you were just like, build me a weather tracking system, build me a like a full model of the war in Ukraine where like I can interrogate any aspect of it. I think if within the next year we start to see models in like the top 10 on top 10, maybe like top 5 on the Metaculus quarterly forecast. Like they have these forecasts every quarter. Like if it turns out that like AIs can like really well actually be predicting future events, I think like longer things. I mean, I think again the million line applications thing, I don't think will happen for, I don't know, 2 or somewhere between, I don't know, 3 to 5 years, right? So like I think if it happened in the next 3 years that you were just able to ask for any for something that would have taken 10 years ago, like a proper startup to build, then I think that would shock me. I think if we started to see actually huge amounts of AI music or AI art in the next couple of years, like not art that was built with tools by humans, but that just like, like you're reading a Substack and it was like, it's not just like a summary Substack, it's like a Substack that puts out like cultural criticism, but it's entirely generated just by like a single line prompt, like write something that 10,000 people will listen to, and it's like it's good. I think in the next 3 years that would surprise me, and that would like be a count against my position. I think it's like something about like, do you like start to have like mass outflows of AI safety researchers from these orgs where they're just being like, this is terrible? Like, I think you would get some statements from the people being like, okay, now we've got to stop. And again, like if you had that in the next 2 years, that would be like a knock against my position. I think if you sense that like public sentiment was cooling or ossifying, that people were like, actually, this is kind of like fine. That would be bad, because like then the argument that you should have like regulated while the iron was hot would have been correct. If like more broadly, yeah, like if it seems like regulators are starting to like lax, I mean, I think generally things get over-regulated. Like people who are like, oh, it would be good for us to have evidence that we can stop these things, I don't find that very credible. We are very good at stopping technology, like nuclear power stations, genetic engineering, like mRNA vaccines. It seems like maybe that technology was like around for a long time. Generally vaccines, like cloning, I'm sure I can think of more of these things, like geoengineering, like geothermal, like has been like hamstrung, like even like onshore and offshore wind. There's many technologies which it seems like are very beneficial, but one group or other, and people are generally suspicious of tech. And if you can have, the AI bias crowd are not going away, the AI ethics crowd, and then like if it becomes like very visible to like a large share of people that like these technologies are really rapidly moving, people will talk about losing their jobs more. But yeah, if that seems to be like a flawed hypothesis for whatever reason, and again, like I would be wrong. I think there's like some case here, right? That like things could be very risky, and so we should avoid that. But to me, that just does like there's a tone around it of being a defector, that often we make bad decisions around new technologies because like people get scared and then they just decide, oh, look, screw it, we've got to stop this technology, and they become incapable of negotiating with the group about what aspects of the technology are good and bad. And normally we dislike those people, but because this is like, I'm just wary of like what's the justification for like why we are happy to be those people. And maybe you're like, that's because this technology is like uniquely dangerous. But I guess I'm like, I think the chances of it being like uniquely dangerous before it is like obviously stoppable are pretty low.
Is that what accounts for your 2 to 9%? Is like scenarios where it's not obvious that we needed to stop it before we do?
Yeah, I guess like I don't know what chunk of that, but like I think there probably is like a 1 or 2% chance of like of it just like maybe it's lower than that, but there is like some let's say 0.2 to 2% chance of it spiraling out of control really quickly.
Yeah.
Somebody you have some sort of Devon type tool, probably not that, but like probably like a tool inside OpenAI that they've been using to try and do AI safety research or something. And then it like starts like rapidly improving itself. And it's like a little bit of time before like the team which builds it like talks to the safety team, and then like whatever like safety valves in the organization need to run. And it's like a while before anyone hears about it publicly. And then by that point, like it's like run away. But and then like it's too competent to be stopped. It copies itself everywhere. We can't shut down the data centers on which it's running. Like it can manage to do crypto, whatever. I don't know the path. But yeah, I mean, I do think that's very unlikely. Like I just like think it's quite a complex. I think there are more warning signs than people normally talk about, but there is like some chance, some small chance. And I think I'm just like pretty wary of being a bad coalition partner. I think about this a lot. I think probably more than like many EAs, frankly. It's like one of my like least EA rationalistic characteristics, I think, is that I have this sense that we should try and behave as if the whole world was like a big voting body. Like, what would they vote for? And it's like, I think if the whole world and all the animals and stuff, if everybody was like given a vote in similar size to their consciousness, and they were like given like 3 weeks on a retreat, and like there's all these experts that they can talk to, including all the animals and all the future people, like it seems to me that they would vote for regulation and like a cautious hand on the tiller, and for us to watch things, which is what's happening. But it is not clear to me that they would vote for like a complete shutdown. Like it's not clear to me that 1% risk would be the risk at which they would be like shut everything down for the next 50 years. And it's not clear to me. Yeah, it's just like people can be a bit weird like that. They can like technology. They can they can.
I mean, I think I agree that probably they wouldn't if they thought it was 1%. I don't really know, but it's like maybe not 1%. I thought that's the
Yeah,
that's why
the 1% is the risk that I'm talking about, is the like spiral out of control risk. The like we don't get a chance to see it before it stops. I think some of the rest of my 9%, or the rest of what I would argue the rest of like Dario's 20% risk or whatever, is things that like it's going to take more than 3 months. We're going to have another point at which to comment on it, and there will be some changes in information. So I mean, like, yeah, my response is like, let's just wait. Like, it seems like we're still going to be able to regulate pretty hard if we need to in 6 months' time. So let's wait. What I will say, right, is that if people have listened this far, I really don't claim to be some brilliant thinker on this, but I do claim to not buy some of the vibes that are happening around this. Like, I do claim not to buy this notion of like now is uniquely only the time to act. Like generally when somebody says like now is the only time, I don't listen to that person. Like if they're trying to sell me something, like I'm like very suspicious of like, you can't stop, you can't think, you can't learn more information, you've got to act now. Yeah, that's like a general rule. I don't. And yeah, I mean forecasters more generally, you saw the results of the XBT, which I don't know, I hear from some people wasn't like super, like they weren't super happy with how that's run. But even the forecasters I know, who are generally a bit more sort of pro AI risk, their medians are like, I think, quite considerably lower than like the median maybe EAs, or like the median AI safety researcher. I mean, I certainly think that like, when I talk to people who are like devs in the AI space, people who like build AI tech, who, I live, my housemate is somebody who like, who like works for a startup doing this kind of thing, and he's like, no, this is not like these are not serious concerns. Like he is just like not at all convinced, and I am just like, there's like a tone of a lot of this discussion where I'm just like, I don't buy it. Like, and show me some track records, show me some things you've built, show me some. And I think there are like concerning aspects of it. Like I do think we're probably going to see like a lot more scamming, though that can be like regulated against. But like, I would just like to create some space and discussion for like, let's give it a year, and then maybe regulate really hard. Like that's the thing when you're driving a boat. Like sometimes you've got to turn sharply. Sometimes you are going to hit the bank unless you turn sharply. But I am just like, I'm having a kind of merry time on this boat ride right now. Like a lot of the AI tech that's being built seems like pretty cool and useful. And it doesn't seem to me like we are like 3 months from apocalypse. And again, like, even if there is like a 1% chance that we are, I am unsure that like the uplifted versions of everybody now and in the future are going to endorse being like, we should stop for a really long time. Like, I don't know whether they, or like, particularly if it, because like in that world, it's really explained to them that like, if this goes well, then like you might live a really long time. There might be huge amounts more GDP. We're going to have drugs to cure your kids. Like, again, people, it's not clear to me that it's like my unique ability and responsibility to be like, no, we're stopping the ride, we're getting off. And like in the past, that has generally been a like poor and overused mechanism. And I acknowledge that AI is very different from past technologies, but I think this tone of like, in ways we don't understand, it could go very, very wrong very, very quickly, feels maybe more similar to that kind of previous discussion than a sort of like, it's going to get better, we're going to see some warning signs. Like, it just, even if it fumes, it feels to me like we're going to see some warning signs, and we really can most of the time be like, okay, shut it down.
Yeah. I mean, it's just all hinges on how good or bad you think the bet is. Like maybe a lot of people would take the 1% risk for 99% utopia. No one's taking the like 99% doom versus 1% utopia.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. It just all depends on who's right about this. I get it would be interesting to like, yeah, the super forecasters versus domain experts thing is kind of interesting because you kind of get like the super forecasters think it's like trivially unlikely, right? And then
Well,
the
not true.
domain
I think it's
experts
like, I think it's like 0.5%,
like it was
if I
like
remember correctly.
point. Yeah, I
Which
mean,
is like,
I'm to me that's like, yeah, okay.
well, okay. To
Extremely
me, like
unlikely
I
to
don't
be.
want to say that's trivial, right? Like 0.5% of risk is like a pretty concerning amount of risk. But like,
Yeah, okay, all right. I misspoke. Not non-trivially likely, but basically a 0.5% chance is not something that I would dedicate a lot of thought to personally. So there's them, and then there's the domain experts from the XBT, which were like, I can't remember now. It was a high, like a few. It was like a few percents. I can't remember exactly what the average was, but it was like higher than that, but lower than a lot of the numbers you see floating around from more prominent people. And then you get up to like the machine learning researchers from the AI impact survey, which I think were like, I can't remember now. It's like the median was like 18 or 19. And then you get up to the safety researchers where they're like 30.
I think the median, it's impacts. My understanding is the median person thought it was like 5 to 10% of people. What is it?
Yeah, there's like a bunch of different stats.
It's 50% of people have risk between 5 and 10%, right? That's right. As in, the 50% of people have a median.
There was one stat that was like an 18 or a 19, but I can't remember exactly what that was. I think it might have been median bad outcomes or something. I can't remember. But anyway, they're higher. And then when you ask like safety researchers, you get something like 30%. And then there are these people who are like way off at the far end.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like there's like two ways you could explain that. You could be like, oh, well, it's like this selection effect. Like the more worried you are, the more likely you are to go and work on safety. But then you could also be like, oh, well, the more time you've spent thinking about this specific problem of like, how could this go wrong, the more likely you think it is. Like, I don't really see any good way to determine which of those things is explaining this effect.
Well,
And like I would be worried that it's the second one, because I don't think that the
okay,
people,
but
my
so I
impression
think a
is like,
question that I would like to know the answer to is like what people's percentage risks are in the period before we can regulate strongly, right? Like if you think, okay, like regulation, let's take a long view. Like regulation takes like 2 years for us to like really bring the ban hammer down on things. A ban hammer is like a gaming / card gaming term when like there's a card that's like too powerful or like whatever. Right, so like, you know, there's like AI, it's OP, we're gonna ban it from the game. How long does that take? Let's like take a long view that's like 2 years. So my question is not like what people's PDOOM is so much as like what fraction, what percentage PDOOM like that has to happen in 2 years. And I just
well,
I think that's got to be lower, if nothing else, like because like I want to have been able to ask this question a year ago, and now we've had a year of it, so like it didn't happen at all in the last year.
yeah, I assume that people's, I would be, I do wish that every time someone gave a PDOOM, they attached a timeline to it. That would be useful.
I
I get
actually
the
don't
impression
like
that most of
PDOOM very
these,
much. I know this is like a
I
this is
mean,
going to be a hot
I
take
don't,
in,
yeah, that's like
yeah.
I also agree. I think it's kind of like a silly, yeah, it's not a very precise way of talking about the thing. And I also feel like that whoever decided to call it that, I mean, it just sounds so stupid. Like whenever anyone
Oh,
outside,
nah. Legislating terms is like many words we actually use are really
well,
stupid.
well, yeah,
Stupid.
no,
Look
but
at
it's
that
like,
word, stupid. Like, no, it's fine.
anyway, what was I saying? Oh my gosh, I've lost my train of thought again. Yeah, I would assume that most people, when they're giving their overall probability, are like accounting for worlds in which we have time to regulate. So if like Yudkowsky's 99% is like accounting for the fact that presumably he thinks that we're not going to get some like nice Goldilocks period where we can slam the brakes before we go too far, kind of thing, because he obviously thinks that for whatever reason we're not going to do that.
Yeah, I just don't really rate Yudkowsky as a forecaster. I'm gonna.
I mean, he was just, you know, he's just my like go-to
Sure.
doomy person example. But yeah, I mean, but there are a lot of other people like Roman Yampolsky. Have you heard of him?
Nope.
He's like, I think he's interesting because he doesn't really seem to be like EA or rationalism adjacent anyway. He's just some like random computer science professor from University of Louisville, I want to say. I can't remember. But he's got like a 99.999 whatever percent PDOOM. And I saw recently that he took a bet with someone because it like, I mean, it wasn't a very high bet. He was like, you give me $100 now, and in 5 years, if we're all still alive, I'll give you 200. So like, not very like,
Sure.
it's not a significant amount of money, but he clearly is like very, very confident in this happening within a fairly short period. And he's not really in, like, if this is like a weird cultural kind of echo chambery thing that's going on where people tend to get really doomy because they're in this niche community, he doesn't really seem to be in that. And
I
he's
mean,
got like a lot of
I'm.
publications as well.
I think the thing I'm trying to surface is more like sometimes it feels like I have to be loyal to like the like EA rat tribe when I talk about these things, and I'm going to say no. I don't. Like I seek to be loyal to like my understanding of reality in terms of like when I discuss truth. And like I don't claim to be a particularly clever person. I know many people who are cleverer than I am, but uh, I yeah, I mean, I guess when I think about this trait, I think about say Katya, right? Katya Grace. Like I think one of her great traits, you know, is that she, on some fundamental level, like backs herself to do thinking, and she can't do otherwise. I should say I date Katya, so there's like conflict of interest or something. But and like I think this is like a good thing for people. I would recommend this for people. I'd recommend it for you. I'd recommend it for your audience, right? Like just to really think that you're more capable. Like I think this discussion goes better when we like back ourselves to think about things more. Like I think you definitely are capable. I think of like of having more views on this than you do. Like I hear like a kind of in your voice, like, oh, like how dare I? And I'm like, well, I just think you get to like, you know, it's not like I'm really
I
a
don't
lot
know.
dumber than a lot of people who speak in this space, but I just think we should get to talk about these things. And
Yeah,
like I'm like, if people want me to be like, we should shut down this like very interesting and growthy technology, which so far as I've seen has not created like anywhere close to the level of risk and isn't moving at the speed, like they need to justify it to me. And I'm just being like, and also I would like them to practice good epistemics, like health in the meantime, which involves like acknowledging when they were wrong or arguing why they weren't. Like maybe they have been wrong, but like to me it looks like people have made some predictions in the last few years that haven't panned out, and they should acknowledge that. And two, like I think the standard of discourse on this is just quite low, right? Like I think, I would like more discussion about like orders of magnitude of competence of these tools. I think Epoch is doing great work in trying to like put things on graphs. I think Sage recently did a thing where they put, which I did has some minor involvement in, but that's not, because I thought it was cool and I still do. Like their AI, what is it, AI Digest or something? If you look that up, you can find they have like all of the metaculus and manifold predictions for the next few years. And like, I think these are things which are going to allow us to have these discussions better. I push against this like sense that like I don't get to say I'm not convinced. No, I'm not
No,
convinced.
I am not trying to like
Oh no,
claim that
you are.
you
I'm not claiming you are.
being
In fact, you've got me on a podcast.
yeah.
I'm just like, I think I'm calling out to everybody, and like you clearly are convinced, right? So like, I want you to talk more about that. Like, I want most people to like feel more confident to be like, like what's going on here? I can build my own models. I can understand like what's the interesting parts of this discussion. And like,
Well,
there's just like been a sway on Twitter recently into like more kind of like soldier mindset-y, like screen caps taking like blocks of text. And I think that's like less helpful in us figuring out the right thing to do.
yeah, I just want to like I to caveat that like I'm not convinced in the sense that like I don't I'm not in any way certain that the do me people are correct. Like I really don't have any idea. I know that you're
That's
trying
not
to
true.
say
You
like
do have
I
like
should be
you're like
well
you're a competent, intelligent individual. Of course you have ideas. Like
well yeah
no.
sure, but like I don't have a like I don't know. I mean, just as a general thing, I think maybe I have the opposite perspective to you, where I think a big problem in the world is people forming opinions on stuff that they're not necessarily qualified to form opinions on.
Right. Okay.
Like I just don't want to do that. I don't want to make that mistake. Like I don't want to be the person who's like, despite not having any knowledge of like computer science or anything, and having just been sort of like casually thinking about this for a year, is like because people ask me, they're like, "Do you have a P doom?" And I'm like, "No," because like, how would I do that? How would I arrive at the number? Like, I think a lot of people that have one, I don't really know how they've arrived at it. Like, I just
Yeah.
don't.
Well,
But like,
okay.
my
This
point
is
is that I
we can
don't
do a
think.
brief. Right.
Yeah,
You go. You go. Yeah. You carry on.
yeah. My point was that I don't think. Yeah, I don't think being convinced one way or the other. Like, I think coming down on the side of like, I think we should have a moratorium does not require being 100% convinced that the thing
Yeah.
is
No.
super risky. Um,
I
I've said that like a
I
number of
think
times, but yeah, I just yeah. Anyway,
I guess I think like this voice is like underrated in the discussion, right? Or like if I had to summarize like good epistemics in like a few sentences, I would be like, you two can figure things out. You, the listener, can figure things out, but you have to make some predictions about the future world, and then like see how they go. Right? Like there's much more to be said about like good epistemics than that. But like those 2 points to like link back to the beginning of the discussion, right? Like make some forecasts about your own life, see how they go. Like if you're competent in anything, you're competent in choosing a job, choosing where you're going to spend the day, what you're going to eat, who you're going to like love, and like make some decisions, make some guesses on how those decisions will go, and then like look back at them afterwards and see whether you were good and like try and become more competent at predicting what your future self desires, right? Like that would be like my advice to basically everybody. I think they could spend half an hour a month doing this, and I think like like that would probably improve the world. um weak probably because it's like such as like a scaly type thing, but like many people think, like they can think things out for themselves, but they never have to test against reality. That's how you end up with like flat earthers and like climate change denial. This is bad. Like, you need to make some predictions about what climate change is going to do in 3 years. That would change your mind if you're wrong. But if you're like thinking for yourself and like making predictions, then like probably like there's like your voice is like underrated in the discussion, and like there are particular kinds of people who tend to think this way more often. Like, this is like, it's like a testable and predictable thing. Like that, like there are some groups of people who are like more likely to think, oh, like people, I should be like, it's not universally distributed that like the people who are like more confident than they should be and the people who are less confident than they should be. And honestly, I think I'm like about as confident as they should be. Like, I spend a lot of time doing caveats. I like forecast a lot. Like, I mean, get in my admonymous if you disagree with me, like, fine, but like, come at me, bro. Like, I think like the people who are like too confident, there's like some of those, but I think there's a lot of people who aren't confident enough, who I want to like, and maybe not on Twitter, because Twitter's not like a hell site, but it can just be like, I think,
It is a
damaging
bit.
to people's like ability to think, because it's like so much dopamine. But I really would like recommend, like, on a forum with your friends in a Google Doc, like, that most people, you you can just like write what you think is going to happen, and then you can send it around to some friends to like, and then when they say, oh, that's wrong because like Yudkowsky says it is, you can say, I don't understand that, please can you explain that to me? And if they don't, you can wipe it away, because like in like the privacy of your own head, like, because someone says so is like not a good argument. Like, and there's like caveats to be made about that point, but like, yeah, like, I'm a big believer that like you can think about things for yourself, you can test them against the real world, you can try and then get better about thinking things for yourself, and like,
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think this is something I could probably afford to spend more time doing. But yeah, like I'm
no,
not.
no, 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 no. You like,
Oh,
you're already a very careful thinker. Like, you don't need to spend more time doing it. You just like need to be like, you know
or
what, Sarah, I'm competent. Like, I think like, just
well,
imagine you're me for a day, right? Just like, just gain some like unnecessary confidence, like, because I think you're probably like underconfident in your opinions. I think they're like better than you think they are.
oh, thank you. Yeah, I don't know. Well, I think the point that I for me it really really isn't about deferring to any one person in particular. Like, because when I first started looking into this, I was like, I did think, okay, it seems like there is some deference to particular figures going on here. It seems like there are some weird insular culty
Yeah,
dynamics going on here. Let me investigate that. And like the reason that I came down on the side of being concerned is just because I observed that there were these people from actually quite different backgrounds all seeming to converge on similar like
sure.
levels of concern. So, like it isn't like I think that there's a problem where a lot of people, because the people like Yudkowsky are like the loudest, unfortunately, they'll see it and they just won't go any further than that. They'll be like, oh, this is coming from this particular subsection of society and it must just be an echo chamber that they're all in, which is probably true to a certain extent, but it's just that you can find so many people who think similar things and just like actually don't have anything to do with that. And so like that's why I think it's worrying. But it isn't, yeah, it's very much not about
Yeah,
deference to any one
but
individual.
you're never
um
going to change. You're not going to make those people speak less. And for anyone listening, I imagine that I could be wrong, Sarah, you can disagree with me, but I imagine that both of us actually have like reasonable degrees of respect for Yudkowsky on some aspects.
yeah.
But like, yeah, personally, I don't respect him as like a forecaster, and I think he can sometimes. I have some other criticisms too, but like, I have many other things that I think he's great at. Like, yeah. So I don't want to be too negative on him, and I don't think you do either. But yeah, like, I don't think you're ever going to like make those kinds of people speak less. But what we can do is like improve the epistemic commons for everyone else, right? We can be like, no, it's like normal for us to like want to have our own inside views and to like feel confident in them, and it's like entirely legitimate to be like, like I, Nathan, am not convinced by that, and like you, Sarah, like have done some thinking and have come I think it's quite reasonable to be like, I've seen a load of people from different backgrounds who have come to the same conclusion, and I find that like very concerning. And I, you know, yeah, like I think the average listener to this podcast, I probably think they are like, you are much more competent than you think to make guesses about the world. Ideally, just like write them down, look at them in a year's time, and then think, how could I have made better guesses than the ones I made?
Mm-hmm.
I think, like, yeah, yeah, and I mean, for what it's worth, I can only speak to like the people I think will listen to me, and therefore, like, sometimes that can look critical to the more sort of like AI safety side. But the like, oh, everything's absolutely fine, we should just like motor side, they don't care what I think. But I have some pretty big criticisms of them too, right? Like their arguments are like sometimes extremely poor. Like LeCun, I just think doesn't argue very well, makes some really stupid arguments sometimes. Like Andreessen is like kind of obviously writing polemic. He is
Yeah.
like just trying to like spur people up, and will write, I think they're sometimes caught between a trap of saying that AI is like the best thing ever and AI is hardly important at all. And it does seem to me there comes, just because I don't think the risks come within the next year doesn't mean I don't think they come in the next 5 or 10 years. And also, like, yeah, I'm not a big regulation guy in general, but like I think the amount of regulation we've had so far is like okay. I'm like, I think our foot should be like hovering over the brake pedal. And I think it's hard to allot responsibility for like bad behavior on Twitter. But I think a big chunk of it, some of it comes from like the safety side, but a big chunk of it also comes from like the EAC side, who I think just have like, well, no, I think they have like worse epistemics overall. I think they're like much more willing to like have this be a fight, much more willing for it to like descend into memes and insults, uh, and and that is bad behavior from them. And I don't tend to like respect those people as like interlocutors. And I'm not saying that that like automatically means they're wrong. People I don't respect sometimes right, but um, a thing I think about a lot is about how you maintain a good epistemic commons, and like to what degree like genuinely harsh sanctions are a part of that, right? Blocking, banning, like strong language, like in terms of like, no, you're wrong, that's a really stupid thing to say, and you should take that back, or you should leave. And I think my sense is generally to come down pretty soft on those kinds of things. But I think that does sometimes lead to like kind of like a creepingly worse, or like, yeah, like I can see the case for that. And I don't know how you create a space where like you increase the average level of like epistemic competence. I think forecasting
Mm.
spaces, while they are sometimes edgy, are actually like pretty good for this, because everybody can see people's forecasting track records, and generally the like edgiest people don't have very good track records. Like many of the best forecasters I know, they take some controversial opinions, but they're like pretty milquetoast about it. There's a few who are like, sparky and will say something to get your like, but that's actually like not the norm. But I think in some spaces, in like non-orthodox spaces, it becomes like very easy to like ram to the heterodox, and I think that often is like boring and dumb. And yeah, I think there's like a bigger problem here, that this is like an iceberg of like, how do you discuss things well? How powerful is it to be like crude and mean, and to like argue badly? And like, how do you not go insane? And like, I think the EA forum and Less Wrong have each come up with their own solutions to that, which are like much better than most places. And I don't know whether Twitter has the tools for that, but I hope, yeah, I hope it can.
I do think that Twitter is a bad place to have conversations. I'm just doing it on there
Yeah,
because I don't know where else to do it. But it is like, yeah, I can feel the like overwhelming, yeah, all of my cheap shots or whatever, or my like yeah, like my put downs of people I disagree with are the things that get the most engagement, and I'm like aware that those aren't the most useful things to be putting out there, but like so tempting.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
but yes.
I think, I mean, I basically have to like very carefully control my Twitter.
Mm.
Uh, you know, I think I have like a low level addiction to it, and it is like useful to me and it brings value to my life, but I can't I can't just have it unlocked on my computer and my phone. I just like I will spend 9 hours on it a day.
I think I have
Um,
a high level addiction to
right.
it.
And so,
Yeah.
I mean, my recommendation to anybody who has this or like things that have worked for me is really to like to lock it after some amount of time, and to have some sort of like financial penalty to unlock it if you need to. That genuinely like feels, honestly, people must think that like GiveDirectly have some sort of like compromise on me, because like every time I need to go on Twitter during the day I have to like pay GiveDirectly on my phone, and so there's like these like micro payments are like going out, and I don't know what
Oh my
GiveDirectly
God.
thinks about this, but like like they must be thinking like there's a black file somewhere that like someone is like lifting the phone every 20 minutes saying, Nathan, we need another few quid. But yeah, like that's my piece I've made with it, and that is like the most stable like Nathan Twitter ecosystem that I've built. A lot of people I talk to, it's a pretty common thing. People say like, oh, I have it blocked for these periods of the day, I can unblock it. I talked to somebody who was like literally like $100 or something, like some you've got to like figure out the amount that means that you use it the right amount and not more. You've got to rigorously stick to that schedule. Like that's what I do. I'm not saying this will work for everyone, but I think like many people have Twitter addictions because it's so like dopamine heavy. uh and I don't know, if you want recommendations of where to talk about this, I can give those for you personally, but like I'm not saying that's any of my business.
Yeah. 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 And I think in general, yes, I would definitely benefit from spending less time on Twitter. I think most people who I engage with on Twitter would also benefit from spending less time on there. It's definitely true. Um, yeah, we should probably wrap up soon because I feel like we've been chatting for a while, but this has been really fun.
Yeah.
In case anyone doesn't know where to find you, do you want to tell them where to find you?
So I guess if you want my long form stuff, that's nathanpmyoung.substack.com, and then my short form attempting not to go insane is on Twitter at nathanpmyoung. So Nathan PM are actually my initials, Young, but enjoyably it is both prediction markets. People are like, oh, Nathan prediction markets Young. And also whenever I talk about politics, people will be like, oh, like PM like prime minister, and I'm like, yeah, that is good, but I didn't. It was my parents who chose that. So yeah, those are places. Nathan PM Young on Twitter or Substack.
Awesome. Wow. Thank you. This has been fun.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think this is great, and I appreciate you giving your views. And I'd like to hear more from you and more from other people.
Cool.